Hello. Today I've got a very brief update on the Super Cub for you. I've had a lot of messages, people asking how the rebuild's going, which is very heartwarming actually to see just how many people love this aeroplane and are interested in its future. Unfortunately, the update at the moment is that there's not really much update. I have decided on what frame we're going to go with. I've organised the rebuild of this engine. Some stage we've got to get time to actually pull it off, send it over to Brett. But aside from that, I just haven't really had the time. So I assure you, I haven't forgotten about it. It is happening, but there's just been a few other things on the higher priority list at the moment. What I do have today for you though is a walk around of the Scout, which is just behind me for an annual. So whilst it's in for annual, I thought I'll show you the differences, similarities between the Scout and the Super Cub. Let's go and have a look. I should preface this walk around by saying that it's not a museum piece or a showpiece Scout. It is a working aeroplane. 5,000 hours total time, and previously did fire spotting in Western Australia. Then was bought from the Western Australian government by the fellow who I bought it off, who actually delivered it for me. So it's not quite as pristine as the Cub was, but it is in pretty good condition really. Just cosmetically it's got a few little dings and bumps, but that happens with a 5,000 hour aeroplane. I've got some mud and that sort of thing on the struts and the tail when I brought it over. It was quite clean when it got delivered. I had a little bit of an altercation with some soft dirt, unfortunately. Doors are quite stylish. That one pops up just like the Super Cub, but then the bottom door very fancily comes out at a flash angle. It is a lot more room inside the Scout than the Super Cub. The seats are about the same width, but they were pretty well in the Cub. The wall of the Cub comes to the seat, whereas as you can see here, there's a lot more room in the Scout. The other difference, be it an advantage or a disadvantage, depending on whether you're a Cub purist or not, the brakes, toe brakes, not heel brakes, which does make it, for training purposes, a little bit more normal for students who are used to most aeroplanes, which have toe brakes instead of the heel brakes. Flap lever is much the same as the Super Cub, except instead of up, half and full, we've got up, 1, 2, 3, and 4 to go to full. And the divisions there between the flap settings are flaps 1, 7 degrees, 2, 16, 3, 21, and 4, 27. What I have found is that I pretty well just use it like a Super Cub and go 2 clicks for half flap or another 2 clicks for full flap. Switches are overhead. For all intents and purposes, the airframe is essentially a decathlon. It's basically a decathlon with much liftier wings and flaps for all intents and purposes. So aside from the teeny weeny tyres, which at some stage I'll solve and put the bush wheels off the Cub on it, the first difference you see is the prop. So it's got a constant speed unit and a much stubbier prop, whereas the Cub is a fixed pitch prop with the Bore STC, which is a really big long prop. And the engine in this is an 0360, so carburetted 360 but with a CSU, whereas the Cub is an 0320 with a fixed pitch prop. Very much the same engine though, just slightly bigger capacity. One super advantage of the Scout is that you can remove the entire belly from pretty well the front of the aeroplane all the way down to the tail, which means it's a lot easier to do fault inspections, cable inspections and the like. One disadvantage though is where the battery box is. You've got to remove that entire belly pan to get to the battery, whereas in the Super Cub it's just a a couple of half turns on the top of the fuselage and you can get straight to the battery. There's a real T. For comparison on the Super Cub, to get to the battery box, remove the panel and the bird poo, and there's the battery box right there. It's a little bit easier to get to. And with the belly, unlike the Scout, the Super Cub is fabric, but on the new frame I'm actually going to get the modification to have the metal tabs, or the tabs on the frame, so they're not going to have a metal belly on there to make for easier maintenance. Something else the Scout has that the Super Cub doesn't, the spades on the ailerons. And as the name would suggest, the purpose is for digging holes in the ground during a ground loop. But they also help with roll control and give a little bit more precise handling than the Super Cub in the roll. The Cub has a trimmable horizontal stab, whereas elevator trim for the Scout is achieved through the trim tab on the left-hand elevator. Which is better? Not really sure, they're both very effective. Exact same tail wheel setup as the Cub. The Cub has bungees for the suspension, which is an incredibly forgiving gear. The Scout a little bit less forgiving with the spring steel, but seems to have a lot less bounce in it than a Decathlon does, despite looking very similar. It sits quite a bit taller on the gear as well than the Decathlon. The Scout has a super handy baggage compartment, which is still full of all the bits that came with it, but plenty of room for a dog to sit in there once it's cleaned out. Just latches up with two key latches. No extended baggage like in the Cub. That's all empty in there. There's a bit more of a pain with the Scout is refueling it. The fuel caps on the Cub are a little bit further inboard, which makes them easy to reach, especially with the step on the gear. But no step on the gear of the Scout. I'll have to look into whether there is an STC for one. And the caps are a little bit further outboard, which pretty well means that you've got to have a set of stairs or a ladder to be able to get to it to refuel. The good thing is though, it carries piles and piles of fuel, so you're not refueling all that often. And the max takeoff weight is 2150 pounds in the Scout versus 1750 pounds for a 150 Super Cub. So you can realistically carry two people and quite a bit of fuel. There you have it, very brief walk around of the Scout, a couple of comparisons to the Super Cub. Hopefully we'll have this annual finished very shortly. It's a little bit more intensive than a usual annual, just because it's the first time we've had it in the shed. But I hope you found the video almost interesting. As soon as the annual's done, we'll do a talk through of a startup and a flight in the Scout and compare it to the Super Cub. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next video.